The drawing from yesterday's video has a number of bare trees on the left and right sides, which reminded me that bare branched trees are often a struggle subject for people. So I thought I'd make a video that showed common weaknesses in drawing bare branches. And I'll draw it, I think, a better way and highlight the differences, and then we'll compare the two. And at the end, I've got something I think very interesting to show you about the reference photo. So here's our reference. It's taken late in the day, and we can see the branches all really clearly, which is always helpful in what we do. So I'll let myself start to draw some things, and then I'll start to highlight some of the weaknesses, I think, in the way I'm drawing these branches now. And then in a moment, I'll redraw this section, putting into place what I think are better ways. Now, notice that with my lines for the branches, I go up one way, I come down another way, and sometimes I go up again and go over a line and come back down the other line on the other side in the other direction. Back and forth, generally, I think, is not a strong way or an effective way to draw accurately or to draw with variety and interest in our lines. My advice would be keep the lines always in one direction for any one branch, whatever direction you may choose. Don't go up and down, because that can become mindless outlining if we're not careful. Another thing I'm doing now is snaky lines. If I look at the branches on the tree, some of them certainly have a snake-like effect. But if I look more closely, a lot of them don't. A lot of tree branches don't have a snake-like appearance at all in the way they grow, and particularly trees where branches can snap off fairly easily, they often get quite abrupt turns 10, 20 years later when the branch has regrown. And we lose all of the visual interest in the tension between these, if you like, right angles or curves, then sudden turns in another direction, if we just make everything snake-like. So that's something definitely to avoid. And you'll notice that this is now so that's two of the points, back and forth lines we want to avoid. Generally going from the bottom, snaky lines, because they're not really accurate or represent what's happening, I think are good to avoid. And then generally not doing our lines from the bottom up, I think, is helpful. Now, this might make more sense when I show you, I think, a more helpful technique to use in drawing the trees, that generally drawing our branches from the bottom up doesn't make for the best drawing at the end. But it's easy to see why we do that, because, well, we start at the trunk and we move up and we aim to make the branches thinner and thinner as they go upwards. Often, though, that's harder to do than it seems. Now, the other thing I'm doing now, which is the fourth, I think, unhelpful habit in drawing branches, is I'm drawing all the branches over the top of each other. Now, I deliberately chose a photo which was very silhouetted because, well, sometimes that's what we see, or it's what we almost see. But is it a helpful way to draw them? We'll see when we compare the other. And the final point is that the small twigs often are always drawn right at the very top, around the circumference of the tree, if you like. That's where we see the mass of small twigs. Is this a helpful way? Again, we'll see in a moment. Now we're going to draw the same section of this tree in what I think, or what I hope, looks like a better way. So firstly, notice that I'm not drawing snake-like sections, and I'm actually drawing each section separately. And by each section, I mean where a branch progresses until it has a bit of a change of direction. I find the best way to actually capture the if you like, fullness of that change of direction is to stop my drawing, and therefore I'm not drawing a corner with my pen. I'm actually drawing an angle, not a rounded corner, but a sharp angle more. I find that way I create far more interesting looking branches and curves and effects. And it also lets me far more easily and accurately draw the actual branch structure, shape, effect of this particular type of tree, because branches branch differently. Some come out horizontally, some shoot up almost vertically, some branch a lot, some don't branch very much as they move towards their circumference. And the other thing I don't do is my lines don't go back and forth up the sides of the branches. They go in one direction for each segment that I'm drawing. Now, I might do some of the lower segments from the top down. I might do some of the upper segments of a branch from the bottom up. So there's no hard and fast rule, but I keep it the same for each section of branch, I hope. And I find this lets me control the thickness of the branch very much. Generally, I draw trees from the top down. And the very last thing that I draw then is actually the tree trunk going to the ground, because I don't always know for sure exactly how wide I need to make it until I can see what the width of the branches feeding down into it are in my drawing. Generally, my branches from the top down, and you'll see I often do the little cluster of twigs at the end of a branch before I draw any of the branch, or where I draw the part of the branch that connects them with a sturdier section that I've already drawn. So my line's in one direction, not drawing long snake or river-like segments, but doing the separate curving parts of each branch separately, or even just the straight parts between major branching sections off that branch. Now, the other thing that is a big difference in this is that I'm drawing the front branches first. And this is going to be something that will be so much clearer if you see at the end where I compare a second photo that I took of this same tree, but from the side. It shows us an absolutely essential point to remember that from many, many, many drawings I see, clearly in the artist's mind, hasn't been very prominent, if at all. So it's really important to understand how this works, I think, and these two photos at the end will show you of the tree, of the actual tree I drew. But what I'm doing now is I'm choosing to make some branches closer than others. Now, if there was more sunlight, I actually might be able to work out which branch is closer rather than just choosing some to be closer. But for this purpose, it doesn't really matter. I just want my tree to look real. So I'm choosing some of these branches to come closer, and I'm drawing them first because we see closer things in more detail and with more prominence. And the branches that are further back, I don't run my lines through the branches I've already drawn, as much of a time saver as that might be. And it's tempting to think, well, that's how it looks in the reference. But it can look that way in the reference, and it can look that way in earlier times of the day as well. But it creates a very flat cartoon-like effect, which generally is not what we're wanting in our drawings, unless that's a deliberate stylization that you're wanting to create in what you're drawing. So once I've drawn the front branches, every branch that crosses those branches I've already drawn has to go behind those branches. And then I have branches that go behind branches going behind already. So in other words, I try not to cross things at any point. And the fifth point of an unhelpful way to draw branches, I think, involves the very small twigs at the very ends of the branches that the leaves attach to. Now, when we look at a branch, we have these cluster of twigs at the very end of the branch. And if we're not paying careful attention to our reference, it's easy to presume that when we draw our tree, that means that these, if you like, little branches of twigs are all on the, for want of a better word, the approximate circumference of our canopy, because they're all at the very top. But this betrays the fact that we've actually begun to see our tree as two-dimensional rather than as three-dimensional. And this is where careful observation is needed to not fall back into thoughts, memories, presumptions thinking we know what this subject is in a way that stops us observing our reference more carefully. Now, at the very end, when I compare two photos, this photo and a second photo of our reference tree, it will make this point clearer. But while, yes, the clusters of twigs are at the top of each branch, the branches don't all move upwards away from the centre of the tree to the same distance. And the angle we view them at is different. So a long branch can actually appear, the top of that long branch, halfway across the canopy, and therefore where the clusters of those twigs are can be in a band across the centre, not just in a row along the top. And so you can see me doing this now, adding the bands, if you like, of small twigs in various parts. And I want to have varied density. I don't want to have all of these little twigs evenly spaced, evenly distributed. I have to capture the random nature of the tree, of the twigs, of the branches, of a particular viewing point that puts the density of twigs in different places all the time. So trying to deliberately not even those out. What do you think? Do you feel this is a more convincing, or at the very least, a more interesting way of drawing our tree branches? It probably takes a little bit more time. It certainly takes more concentration and thought. But if I'm going to draw a tree, I probably should commit to drawing the most effective one I have understanding and technique to draw. So just doing the final ones here. And I also do a bit of hatching that's horizontal hatching rather than vertical hatching. And have a look when I compare the two drawings together in a moment and see whether you think the horizontal hatching doesn't work better. I think it works a lot better, and it also lets us more easily show where shadow or shade is on the branches in a more detailed drawing, which can help create a sense of direction, because branches going in different directions capture the light in different ways, and so it does also increase the three-dimensional feel of our branch. So I'm just adding a bit of varied hatching and we're done. So let's compare the two now and see how they look together. So here we go. What do you think? Do you feel the bottom one is a more effective capture, has a greater sense of realism, that the upper one looks a bit more stylized with the approach taken in these 5 ways compared to the one underneath? In the end, how we draw anything is up to us, but I hope this video is helpful in giving more understanding and ideas of how this might be done. So now we'll look at the 2 photos that we have, and now this second photo is taken from having walked past the first photo on the left hand side, and when I'm side on it at 90 degrees, I now look at the tree and I take a photo of it. So we're actually seeing the tree from the side, from the left hand side. And I'll just highlight a few things. So this branch here, that branch there, is that branch there. So now we see it's actually at the very back of the tree canopy, of the upper tree canopy, which is perhaps not where we would have thought, and perhaps that's not where I put it in my drawing, but that's okay, because my drawing, in a sense, was a conjecture based on more information than just memory. It was still based on observation of the actual tree. So now this branch here is this branch here. Now I didn't draw that, but it's helpful to see where it is. This branch here is this branch here. So it's kind of in the middle of our canopy. And this section here is this section here. And this branch here, that section of the branch, is this section of the branch here. So I drew that section actually coming towards us. In life, it's moving away from us. So I find it's incredibly helpful to keep reminding myself that I'm looking at a 3-dimensional, often reasonably spherical, at least in part, object, and to try and work out from my very flat 2-dimensional photograph which parts are coming towards me, which parts are moving away, which parts are in front, which parts are further back. And this is more of a challenge when the tree is bare branched than when it's covered in leaves. So I hope these 5 technique thoughts have been helpful for you. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I love drawing trees. I got to say, bare branched trees are more of a challenge for me than foliage canopies, but they're still a great adventure if we love trees and we love drawing. So I hope these tips have given you a bit of direction in a helpful way. But look, however you want to draw trees and however they turn out, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.